At your command, the ancient device became your instrument, spinning to life with deafening resonance and gathering up the swirling essence like thread on a great spindle. There, in the pale pulsing glow of the machine that set you on this path long ago, you summoned all your strength, focusing on your objective and blocking out all else. With a single concussive blast that rocked the chamber and sent you tumbling to the ground, you freed the souls from their stasis. Exhausted, your consciousness slipping away, your last sight was of the machine, dark and dormant. Then your eyes closed, and sleep welcomed you at long last. After coming to and searching for some time, you discovered the route Theos used to enter Sun in Shadow, and embarked on a long and arduous ascent back to the surface. You emerged in Ter Evron after days of tunneling through the rubble Theos had left behind, and when you stepped into the daylight, you were faced with a different Dyrwood than the one you had left. At your direction, the goddess Woodica ultimately received the empowerment she had sought, albeit not in the manner she had expected. The swirling souls held captive in Sun in Shadow were swept into the great Adra pillar there, sent barreling down through the world's veins to places unknown to mortal sight. Though no word would reach your ears of their arrival, by the time you would return to Twin Elms, word had spread of a miracle on their burial isle, and pious Glanfathans were already streaming in from all over to observe the statue of Woodica there, its once broken crown, now fully restored. But for Dyrwood itself, the last hollow birth had come and gone, and the country celebrated the lifting of Wydwin's legacy none the wiser as to what future costs its end might hold. Helia, who had expected the souls to be returned to the Hollowborn, was infuriated by your duplicity. The goddess of motherhood demanded new births in compensation, and made a bargain with Bereth to trade death for new life. The skies of Dyrwood darkened, blotted with swarms of birds and other winged creatures, called together to claim what the Sky Mother believed to be hers by right. For months, the people of Dyrwood were forced to stay under shelter for fear of the vicious, unexplained attacks from the sky. The incidents left entire villages decimated and littered the streets of Defiance Bay with corpses covered in 1,000 puncture wounds. The loss of the souls you had promised to Entropy would be no setback to Remergand, nor to Andra, for the Beast of Winter trudges ever forward, and the will of the Lady of Lament is as unstoppable as the tide. In Dyrwood, the weather quickly chilled. Unseasonable frosts destroyed the year's harvests before giving way to the coldest winter in memory. Many who survived the famine would soon freeze to death in their own homes. The oceans proved no safer. A barrage of squalls pounded the harbors along the Dyrwooden coast for months, sending many ships to be forever lost in the depths of Andra's domain, either mourned or forgotten, both to the lady's liking. It is said that Galawain is the enforcer of the guards, and is known to hunt down those who wrong them. To wrong Galawain, then, is truly to wake the beast, and the Father of Monsters took great umbrage at your broken promise to him. Along with Mogren and Abidan, Galawain embarked upon a more direct approach to claiming his quarry. In the months that followed, the frontier settlements of Dyrwood were inexplicably attacked by packs of beasts and monsters, suddenly organized and unafraid to approach Kith on their own land. Many such villages were all but destroyed by the time troops could be dispatched from local garrisons. Those that weren't destroyed by the beasts of Galawain often found themselves at the mercy of the fires of Mogren. A dry spell throughout Dyrwood led to a rash of forest fires on a scale not seen since the War of Black Trees, and many settlements paid the price for their proximity to the wilderness. In the cities, meanwhile, dabblers in animancy who had placed souls into golems and other moving vessels soon found that their creations had risen up against them. Such constructs terrorized their surroundings, killing indiscriminately and often in great numbers before being subdued. Followers of Bereth have a saying that life is a debt all must pay in death, and their god is known to always collect what is owed. In breaking your word to Bereth, a debt was created. Souls were owed to the cycle, and the agents of the god of inevitability would not be refused. An epidemic of unexplained deaths struck Dyrwood in the days that followed the legacy. Most often, the dead would be travelers on the road, known to be a favorite target of Bereth's pallid knight, who exacts impossible tolls from those who have journeyed for too long. The elderly, too, seemed to pass on in alarming numbers. But just as often, the deaths appeared to strike randomly, and for no reason at all. Those who sensed the involvement of the twinned god dubbed the calamity Bereth's price, supposing it a payment for the end of Widewind's legacy. With the birth of his hollow-born child, the last threads of Lord Radric's sanity frayed and broke apart, his wife the first victim of his wrath. With a fortress to protect him and a garrison of loyal soldiers at his command, he continued to snuff out all signs of resistance from the citizens of Gilded Vale, real or perceived. In the end, all would hang from the boughs of the village's trees, watching over their dead town with vacant eyes. Following the assassinations of Duke Avar Wolfgren and Lady Webb, Defiance Bay was thrown into political upheaval. In the ensuing weeks, the streets had become the domain of looters and blackguards. Few dared to step outside their own doors alone or unarmed. But order would soon come from an unexpected source. House Dominel, realizing that stability was good for business, brought the city's criminal elements in line through a systematic campaign of fear and intimidation. Capitalizing on a reputation for brazen fearlessness earned with the murder of a marshal of the Crucible Knights, the Dominels aggressively pressed their authority, murdering all would-be rivals and collecting coin from all transactions in the city, and becoming arguably the most influential house in all of Dyrwood. Defiance Bay would not fare so well. Squeezed by the Dominels for every piece of copper, prices soared and trade ground to a halt. Many commoners found themselves unable to make a living, or forced from their homes to make room for others more favored by House Dominel. Petty crime, prostitution, and vagrancy would reach new heights under their watch, and many would flee the city in droves for the more favorable economy of New Haomar. Though the machine atop Ter Noaneth had been drained of its accumulated essence, the machine had not seen its last use. Heritage Hill was rebuilt, and no sooner had the first families moved in to resettle the district than members of the Leaden Key, acting under standing orders from their Grand Master, climbed the tower and reactivated the machine. The initiates slew a handful of the new settlers under cover of night and watched as history repeated itself, the victims reanimating and devouring the survivors. After this second incident, the district would remain abandoned. The Duke's assassination at the apparent hands of an animancer had caused catastrophic rioting in the streets of Defiance Bay, and few animancers survived the first day. In the weeks that followed, angry citizens, their rage stoked by word that the Duke had been about to ban the practice, formed vigilante mobs and hunted down the survivors. The sanitarium was decorated with the dismembered heads and torsos of those who had practiced the science, and anyone caught studying it thereafter was soon added to the macabre display. The age of animancy in Dyrwood had come to an abrupt halt. In the town of Dyrford, an underground cult dedicated to Scan insinuated itself into the town's institutions. It became a popular travel destination for the wealthy, who were actively courted by the town's leadership. But few who visited the town would ever return, as they soon found their fortunes plummeting and their reputations destroyed by their own kin. The rejuvenation of Cadnua was a short-lived endeavor. While the rise of a new master had presented new hopes of the keep being restored to its former glory, time proved otherwise. Plans for maintenance of the structure were postponed time and time again, until ultimately they were scrapped altogether, their master's priorities lying elsewhere. Pallegina had missed the opportunity to complete her mission from the Duke's Bells. The Dyrwood's trade with Air Glanfath remained weak, but the Valian republics were unable to enter Glenfathan markets. For her repeated insubordination and loss of lucrative trade, Pallegina was cast out of the Brotherhood of Five Sons. She traveled north of the Eastern Reach, where she tried to avoid trouble as a caravan guard, but she could not escape the strange looks and unwanted attention her appearance brought. Adair chose not to return home to Gilded Vale. Through a number of quiet inquiries, he soon found his way into the underground organization of Aethasians known as the Night Market. Ironically, in learning that the gods had been fabricated, Adair found his faith in Aethus renewed, and that his god was neither alive nor truly a god had become irrelevant. He rose quickly through the ranks of the Night Market for his optimism and for his bold leadership, his ultimate goal to make the Dyrwood a place that would welcome followers of the Shining God once again. After the Watcher sent him away, Aloth found himself cut off from every authority and ally he had ever known. His family, his homeland, the Leaden Key, and, finally, the Watcher. He wandered on his own for several days, passing through villages and settlements. The Dyrwoodens he passed looked on the ragged Adiran with suspicion, and he did not linger long enough to let their misgivings turn to violence. Finally, he passed the last township and reached the wilds of Aer Glonfoth, alive with hunter and beast alike. Yet none accosted him, and he eventually found himself among the ruins of the Engwithans. He found one of the ancient machines easily enough. When he did, he remembered the rituals he had learned from the Watcher. With a final sigh, he activated the device, surrendering his soul to the powers beyond. After all that he had learned in the Watcher's company, Kanorua could no longer see meaning in his pursuit of the Tanvi Oratoa. He decided to leave what remained of it within the depths of the Endless Paths and return home. Kana bid the Watcher farewell and sailed back to Rawatai, spending the tempestuous journey reflecting on the time he had lost to the pursuit of falsehoods. His family found Kana much changed, his fiery excitement replaced with a weary solemnity. Determined to change his wandering ways, Kana took up a quiet life as a lorekeeper at the college, teaching young students the traditions of their people. With Theos defeated and the souls released from Sun in Shadow, healthy children were born once again in the Dyrwood. Pleasant and peaceful memories rose to fill the cracks in the grieving mother's mind. She returned to the birthing bell, unaware that the village nearby had become an empty desolation in her absence. Thus she began her tireless vigil atop the Adra, awaiting mothers and children who never came. Durrance continued to blame Woodica for the atrocities of the Saints' War. Believing Magrin to have been a pawn in the machinations of the Queen that was, and feeling that Theos's expulsion had been a step towards reconciliation with his goddess, Durrance tried for a time to reopen communication with her. When only silence came, he took it as a condemnation of his continued existence. Ultimately, he built a pyre and threw himself upon it, using his own shattered staff as kindling. In her 4-month journey back to Nositoc, Sagani found that the landscapes she traveled had become strangely colorless, the food bland and unsatisfying. She watched the Dyrwood, Aer Glonfoth, the Valian Republics, and the lands beyond slide by with a dull sense of dread. She returned home to great celebration, yet the words of joy and congratulations rang hollow to her. Old beloved songs sounded toneless. The rituals of changing seasons became drudgery, and Sagani experienced her life back in Masuk as if in someone else's skin. So she fought to feel the worth of her actions, or, at least, to let her village feel them. She led ever longer and more ambitious hunts, mentoring the younger rangers who followed her. On one such expedition, her party was beset by a blizzard, and she pressed on where her companions turned back. She did not return to Masuk. For you, the death of Theos brought an end to your waking visions, and a silence to the whispers of the past. In their absence, you were able to sleep. The questions of a distant lifetime ceased to trouble your soul. All that remained was what to make of the answer. But at the moment, there was little to be done, and the matter would have to wait. A long journey loomed ahead.